next meta framework for Angular with Analog? I'm happy to do it. I'm Brandon T. Roberts. On Twitter, you can follow me there. I tweet out GIFs, I talk about sports. I block people sometimes, but it's only temporary. I have fun either way. I am the creator of Analog JS, maintainer on the NGRX project, Angular GDE, which I'm really proud of because it just means I've done a lot of stuff in the community for a while, which is pretty cool, and an index champion, and an engineering lead at OpenSauce, where we're helping open source maintainers and companies in there to get visibility into the open source projects. We can see some of that here. I'll share this out on Twitter also, but you can see this chart that the Angular community, or Angular ecosystem is alive and well, as I called it at the time, but you can get visibility into open source projects, you can create a workspace, you can check out this workspace at oss.fy/Angular, and even create your own and see what projects you like to track and see what the activity and things are there. So, for this talk, we'll talk quickly about Vite, because Vite enables a lot of the things that Analog does. We'll get into Analog, and we'll get into contributing. So Vite. Vite is, in a way, taking over a lot of the broader web ecosystem. There are a lot of tools and frameworks that are built on top of Vite. And when I gave this talk previously, we were talking about Angular in this space as trying to get into the mix with Vite and get access to these tools and everything else. But I'm glad to say that Analog has come along in this way with support for Vite, and Angular itself has added support for Vite also. So we're kind of bringing things full circle there. So happy to announce, if those people who are watching after, Analog has gone 1.0. Yeah! So we had a long road to get here. A lot of things that we still, are underway that we want to add and do in the future, but it's a good starting point, and I think it's a milestone to be celebrated. So the question is that I've gotten before is how do we get here? Like, why does Analog exist? Like, what are we doing? And I can pretty much answer that in one word: spite. No? Spite. I've used it before. Spite-driven development is a thing. It's you see people talking about Angular online, and we want access to these nice tools and ecosystems, and we want to have some of that too. So the project started out as spite-driven development, as I called it, but it kind of grew on from there. So going back to kind of Analog itself, how we turned Spite into a project and kind of kept it moving from there. We kind of built around some of these cornerstones, and of course, Angular being one of those cornerstones, Vite being a cornerstone also. Another project that I'll mention is called Nitro, which is something that we use for our on the server side, and NX plays a part in this also to help maintain what we ship with Analog. So on the Angular front, a lot of things in Angular have helped support what Analog does, and I was super proud about that because maybe in previous years we may have had a little more friction there, but the team has definitely supported us in that way. And some of those building blocks that contributed to some of the things we do in Analog include like standalone components, the move to ES-build, even things like ESM support, which has caused its share of friction in the ecosystem, and we're still kind of adjusting to that, but it's improving there also. And even the SSR story, the talk that Doug and Jessica gave earlier, alluded to some of more of the things that they're doing in Angular to improve that, which I'm happy to see. So as far as the connection with Angular, Vite, and Analog, like I said, Vite is kind of the foundation of what we're doing here. So Analog provides a Vite plugin for Angular that kind of unlocks a lot of these different things that we want to do in the meta framework itself. And we take advantage of some of those features, such as dynamic imports, where we can help you build like content-focused sites using Markdown, And I'll get into these features later on, including like file system-based routing, and even the Markdown plugin where you can render these content pages easily and render them out there. Nitro, this is big. Nitro is a server toolkit maintained by the ng-conf org, and they have built this toolkit in a framework agnostic way that you can use this server engine and customize it to your needs. So Analog definitely takes advantage of this for things like pre-rendering and deployment targets. Of course, we talked about wanting Angular to be able to ship Angular lots of places, even places that we aren't necessarily traditionally shipping Angular apps and environments and things like that. So it provides functionality for API routes and extensibility there also. And so NX also factors into this because NX is part of the Angular ecosystem, and we support NX workspaces and Angular CLI workspaces, and NX provides us some of the tools that we can use to support both of those. And we do those through generators. We can generate new applications for analog projects within as an Angular CLI workspace or within an NX workspace. For generating things like routes. They also have executors where we're sharing these executors and also using them as builders across both environments. Executors that we use for Vite, which some of that is changing a little within NX, but we're still able to take advantage of that there. Another thing I'll talk about later on is a tool called vtest, which is a relatively new tool in the testing story that improves the developer experience there. And it also has things like automated migrations and presets. So all those things kind of help us build up the project itself and allowed us to ship these certain set of features, the things that we got here to get to the 1.0. And we'll dig into a little bit of those in here, including file system-based routing, as I mentioned before, server-side rendering, or we can render pages on the server before they hit the client, static site generation. One thing that we're really seeing in the usage of Analog is people maybe already have they're already using Angular, they want to build some like marketing sites or content-focused sites on top of that, and it allows them to use the tools that they already have to do that in a pretty seamless way. And API routes and server-side only data fetching. All these things, when people talk about meta frameworks, I think of these as like the core tenet of some of those features there, because Angular already does a lot, and Angular as a framework already has support for some of these things separately, but we want to bring them together in a nice cohesive package, which is what Analog does. So looking at the file system-based router, we use a common convention with the .page.ts syntax here. So this chart just kind of lays out some of the options that you have for building different combinations of routes using file-based routing, and it's all built on top of the Angular router, so you're not necessarily trading off anything for using the file system-based routing for static routes, dynamic routes, and other things like that. Also, server-side rendering. We support commands ng-serve that we talked about before. SSR is enabled. Also support platforms such as Node or even rendering Angular applications on the edge, which I know that there's some improvements being made there also, but we definitely want to support those environments as well. And different deployment providers. As I mentioned before about Nitro, it allows you to package up the application, and they take care of a lot of the custom tooling that is needed to ship to many different places. So places like Firebase or even Netlify, Vercel, Cloudflare, and there are even more places like that, like Edge.io, that you can deploy an analog application to that uses Angular and still have that same common experience there. For static site generation, we use ng-build for that. there's a couple of ways you can do this. One way is to use this routes array here that just has a static array of routes. And we also support you can use a content directory. So you can read a directory of files that you have for maybe Markdown or things like that, and use that to build up the routes that you want to pre-render. So you have some flexibility there, and also have like hybrid rendering, so you can render some pages on the statically and then have some pages only be client side. So as far as API routes go, we define these, like I said, these are defined along with your applications. If you use popular frameworks like Express or even Nest.js, you can define these API routes just all in the same project with file-based syntax also. So I just have an example here of using the server route / products, and we're just defining a page, an endpoint called API products. You can do all your push your server logic here. You want to connect to a database. You want to do things that you need environment variables for. You can then also do that. There's also server-side data fetching. And you may have seen this in other areas, but essentially what you want to do is push more of your code to run on the server instead of the client. So as an example here, we're using the file-based routing syntax. I have an index page here, and I have a server page here that's alongside the page route. So you can define these routes here and do data fetching there. Same thing, it's similar to API routes, but there's a little more integration there, where you can fetch this data on the server and pass it to the client, and that data is resolved as part of the routing. So for in the index.server file, you can define a load function here that provides some arguments, whether they be parameters from the page, but you want to turn those into, make a request and return serializable data, and that data is returned to your index page. And we can use the index page itself. You consume that loaded data, and you can use this with, like I say, using the Angular router, so you can use component input bindings with that, and you can also convert this to a signal convert that to a signal today, and maybe in the future we'll introduce some APIs that are just native signals that you can use in that way. So you don't necessarily have to do that conversion there. So those are a lot of the features that are some of the features that Analog that we shipped in 1.0, and that we're really proud of, and we want to see, looking forward to seeing more people build things with it, and keep shipping Angular apps all over the place. So that's kind of where we are today. So we'll get into where we're going next. There are always more features, always more things to do, and I was kind of going over this even shipping the 1.0. Like there's always bugs to fix, always things, interesting ideas. I mean, I've had people talk to me about ideas, even just here, that I was like, that would have been nice to have, but we wanted to get the 1.0 out the door, so. But yes, as I mentioned before, we're all about expanding Angular into other ecosystems and being able to take advantage of other ecosystems also. And V plays a big part in that. So we have Angular, and we have some support for Vite there also, with Angular using it as a dev server. So we're going to continue with that, with Angular and Analog to use those features, and also connecting with Vite to expand to other areas. I mentioned tools like Vitest and Storybook, and even using Angular components within Astro projects. So if you're wanting to build some static sites that way, even using Angular components within Quick, or even projects like Playwright, which have some support for Vite also. One of those projects is Vitest, which I mentioned earlier, which is a testing framework that's built on Vite. It has a JS-compatible API, and I should have mentioned this fast up front, so we'll go ahead and throw that in there too. But also supports things like snapshot tests, Browser testing is available as an option also. But the good part about it is that you can use VTest within existing Angular applications. I know that we're in kind of a transition phase now where we're looking at the team has introduced Jest as a officially supported testing framework, but VTest is definitely an option that's on the rise there. And it has more features there, but those are like the main features of VTest that you can use. And it handles a lot of those things that Jest does also, but you get a lot more, you get some performance wins and experience wins there. If you want to add VTest to an existing Angular project, and this is not tied to an analog project, so anybody can do this, you can install the @analog.js/platform package and run this schematic to generate the VTest setup for an existing project and test it out. And if you're using Jest-specific APIs, there may be some things that you have to replace, like in Jest or in VTest, there's a VI instead of a Jest APIs, but it should be available to use there. So looking forward to seeing more people try that out. Another tool is Playwright, where Playwright is an end-to-end testing framework that has support for component testing. And we've had some back and forth on that project. There have been some projects out there also that are interested in using the Analog V plugin to bring Angular component testing to Playwright. So I know Playwright is really on the rise also. So being able to use those kind of testing with Playwright, I think would be beneficial also. So we kind of talked about improving the experience of these integrations and bringing these other tools, the availability of these other tools to the ecosystem also. Now we can get into the experimental parts. So I was having a conversation, and the topic came up of how we think about these things, and I was like, well, it's kind of like Angular for the free thinkers, if we want to think about it that way. Where you have to kind of expand you kind of have to just think outside of the box there about these different parts. So I'm not just jokes. So just throwing it out there. So today we are looking at Angular components that we know and love. This is just a simple component here. But if we're looking at just how the component is composed there. So we've been looking at this and just from a different lens, and we're looking at what we're calling is the analog SFC, or single file component. So we're experimenting with this in a way that you can use Angular components, but maybe author them in a different way. And they talked about this. There was a sneak peek of this in the keynote, but did want to talk a little bit more about that. But if we look at the template for defining, and we're using the .analog file extension here, so this will be how you define a template in this SFC for defining an Angular component. So we're not using any decorators, we're not using any classes, but we are still building Angular components. So we can get some of that same functionality there. You want to add some JavaScript to your component, you can define a script tag with a language of TS. You can import your signal, you can still use your counters, and you can just author this in a different way. It has a little bit different mental model there, but you can still achieve the same thing that you would with an Angular component. Same thing for styles. You can define these styles inline in the component itself, and it allows you to iterate more quickly and kind of build these smaller components to use within an analog application. So if we put this all together, we're just looking at, like I said, we're looking at a different way to author an Angular component, and we're kind of decreasing the mental model around building there, but still at the end of the day, still working with Angular tools and kind of enjoying that experience there. And we have some other things in the works here about using these in a even different kind of ways where you can use Markdown in these templates, or if you're using if you want to create interactive documentation for Angular components there. Those are things we're looking at also. And even in a world where signal inputs and the signal APIs are really changing how we think about authoring Angular components, we can use those also, whether it be an input or a view children or view child, even all the signal APIs that are in the works now, or even defining custom metadata there, or even running things like an effect here, with just a similar, different syntax, but still authoring components in that way. We're also looking at things such as import attributes for auto imports for components, and even things like directives and even modules that we can import into the template and use those there. So just looking at different ways that we can round out this experience, or even get feedback from people that are using it and taking advantage of it. So, and like I mentioned before, the team had mentioned before that they are looking at these alternative authoring also. So just wanted to share the things that we're thinking about and other things that we're looking to add. So I know the first thing people are going to think is, well, how are we going to get IDE support for this new alternative syntax for authoring an Angular component? The good news is there's momentum around that also. We have a plugin that's been developed that we can use in WebStorm that's coming along, where you can get syntax highlighting for these analog SFCs and other support there that's coming along the way. Big shout out to the JetBrains team, Jan, Nicholas, and Peter for doing the initial work on that. We definitely wouldn't have been able to move as quickly, being able to support this without their help. So you can go check out the plugin at this URL here. You can also check out if you want to contribute to the plugin and help keep moving that forward, that's available also. Lastly, I'll talk about contributing, because we wouldn't be here without the contributors to the project itself. So contributing to Analog, you can do that in many different ways, whether it be through GitHub issues, documentation, pull requests, or even sponsorships. So going back to the team members that we have today, Robin, Marco from the ng-conf team, and also Luis has been helping out a ton on the project, so definitely want to shout them out here. I also had collaborators on the team, Chow Tran. Everybody probably already knows Chow. He's all over the place. He was on other slides and other projects. They got a project called ng-extension. Him and Josh Maroney and Ania work on that. And also Andres definitely helped out a lot with things such as translation in the docs also. So on the community side of things, we also have grown there. We've grown to over 80 plus contributors. We have 1,500, well now 2,000 plus stars on GitHub. We got accepted into the first GitHub Accelerator. Our Discord community is steadily growing. You can also follow at AnalogJS on Twitter. And if you want to look at partnering with us, whether it be collaboration opportunities and things like that, you can also check out our page for partnerships and things there. So to recap, talked about V, kind of its impact on the broader web ecosystem, where Analog is today, some things we're thinking about going forward, and how we can continue to bring these features and things to the Angular ecosystem. Talked about contributing to the project for people that want to get involved. Much appreciated. Thanks.